natural gas production. We have, as you know, been exploiting, we've been taking oil out of the ground commercially for over 100 years. But just about over 4 decades ago, fortuitously, those who were in charge of the country at the time and our future development saw it fit to move to a gas sector. They started utilizing our natural gas resources, which were a byproduct of the oil production, for our power generation. We are one of the few countries where 100% of our power generation or electricity is generated from the use of natural gas. And very shortly, during next year, about 10% of our country's electricity needs will be coming from the largest solar project to be done in the CARICOM region, right here in Trinidad, in Brecon Castle, Project Lara. The gas was also used for fertilizer production, and it was only last week we had Nutrien, who are one of the largest retail and producers of fertilizer product in the world. Their global CEO was here in Trinidad and Tobago checking out the operations here, which I'm proud to say are a supplier to over 30 countries around the world of fertilizer product, which, as you know, is essential for food security globally. So we moved into fertilizer production shortly after in the 90s. Again, the government had the fortitude to persuade those to invest in the production, the use of our natural gas into the production of liquefied natural gas, LNG, and that really has provided Trinidad and Tobago with a huge source of our income over the past few decades and will continue to do so for decades to come. We then also use our natural gas for more fertilizer production, ammonia production, methanol production, and then also some of it is used in small manufacturing. I take the time to tell the population this and to remind us of this afternoon to emphasize how important the gas industry is. When these contracts were negotiated decades ago, particularly, for example, the LNG in the 1990 period, they always have an end of contract. And the end of the contract of gas supply contracts or LNG licenses, etc., has come together really in the last 10 years that we have been in government. So one of the first things we had to do as a government when we came in 2015, and the Prime Minister having the foresight, fortunately, seeing the importance, understanding the importance of our gas industry, was to focus the efforts from the Office of the Prime Minister along with the Ministry of Energy to really take our gas sector to the next stage of its development. The plants had been built, they'd been utilizing the gas. We began to see gas curtailment issues, meaning a reduction in the production of gas between the 2010 to 2015 period. So the new period, which came about really from about 2013, which would take this country's gas sector into a new direction, required a lot of emphasis, a lot of focus, a lot of strategizing, a lot of effort if we were to secure the future of Trinidad and Tobago. And you, the population, now can see, as I'm sure you can, despite all of the noise that takes place, exactly how much focus, how much emphasis, how much effort, how much energy was put into the securing of our country's future for the next few decades. And the results have been able to come in. You're seeing the results. But today, I want to speak about one of our country's crown jewels, the National Gas Company. And next year, we as a population, as the citizens, because we are the shareholders of the NGC, National Gas Company, will be celebrating 50 years of NGC's existence. NGC 50 years ago was charged with the responsibility of utilizing our gas resources, protecting our gas resources. They built out a national grid, a pipeline to move that gas from offshore to onshore to the various plants and across the country for electricity generation and everything else I've just described. And we have seen tremendous success. But as contracts began to expire, as contracts came up for renewal from the 2014 period, it meant that we were moving into another dimension, because all of our gas resources, when you take it out the ground, it doesn't replenish. It is a resource that is disappearing as you utilize it. So it is incumbent on any government in charge to focus on it and to make sure you secure the future. And that is what I've come to speak about this afternoon. We have spent countless hours with you, the media, members of the media, and you, the population, at every step of the way from 2015, September 2015, explaining what is going on in the energy sector. At no point in time has this government ever shied away from discussing with the population where we are at, what our intentions are, what we've achieved, what we hope to achieve, etc. With one caveat. And that caveat is, in this very sophisticated energy sector, there are times where confidentiality has to prevail to protect the commercial arrangements, because ultimately, all of these are commercial agreements. You have upstream commercial agreements with the largest oil and gas companies in the world like Shell, BP. Just yesterday, the Prime Minister and myself were meeting with the leadership of EOG Resources, which is a very successful American company. And Trinidad and Tobago has managed to stay on their books and to stay as part of their fabric because of the relationships we've developed, because we've encouraged them. And it was very heartening in that meeting yesterday with their chairman and CEO, Ezra, to hear from him the thanking of this government for all of the work that has been done to manage the relationship as they continue, which is what he came to speak to the Prime Minister and myself about, as they continue to invest in Trinidad and Tobago. And they have now given the Trinidad and Tobago operations a very, very aggressive portfolio and a very aggressive timetable to continue the work that they're doing. And I'd congratulate them at this stage. The Mento platform has sailed. You all would have seen over the last few weeks us showcasing this platform, showcasing that it was being built right here in Trinidad and Tobago at TUFCO. And it is now in place, which is one of the things they came to tell us yesterday, as they begin to announce to us some of their future plans. So back to NGC. NGC is a company owned by us, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, for the last 50 years. It has been a highly profitable company, and it has been a company charged with the responsibility of managing all of these various relationships, buying gas from the upstream producers, selling the gas to the petrochemicals, taking small shareholdings that have grown in Atlantic LNG, and also ensuring that there's gas for power production, electricity power production over the past few years. If this is not managed properly, if its decisions with respect to investment are not managed properly, like every other company, it will affect the company. Unfortunately, there were certain decisions that were taken that have led to losses at NGC. So you would recall a couple years ago, NGC suffered for the first time in its history losses of a few hundreds of millions of dollars. That loss at the time, we were open to say, and the books are there to be examined, was as a result of a singular contract that was entered into in 2014, 2015, which I'll spend some time discussing here today, which is the CGCL contract, which is a contract where Mitsubishi Group out of Japan owns 70%. Trinidad and Tobago, us, the citizens, through NGC, own 20%. And the private, limited liability, but publicly traded company, Massey, owns 10%. So Mitsubishi from Japan, 70%, Massey, 10%, NGC, 20%. A contract, and a singular contract that was negotiated into and entered into in the 10 to 15 period, which unfortunately has cost us billions of dollars in losses. So this year, in accordance with normal transparency, etc., NGC produced its accounts for the 2023 period. And unfortunately, we as citizens saw that it had suffered over $1 billion in losses. As part of its communication strategy, which I would like to say was well executed, NGC took the time to meet with some of our leading business reporters in Trinidad and Tobago, sat with them. This was the management of NGC, the financial people at NGC, as well as a few of the board members, including the chairman, Dr. Joseph Kahn of the NGC, sat with some of the reporters and went through with them in great detail the explanations as to why NGC made losses in 2023. The reporters, and I must thank them, reported it very dutifully. You would have seen last weekend, the reports came, they provided the factual explanations for this loss that was incurred. A loss, unfortunately, for 2023 of $1.3 billion. Not surprisingly, exactly on cue, unfortunately, the opposition has come out, and again, fortunately, most of the media ignored them and did not report because the media by then had gotten the true facts as to what caused these losses. But unfortunately, the opposition has come out and once again attempts to mislead the population, which is what I've come to discuss with you here this afternoon. So first of all, in 2023, NGC, as has been published very openly in the newspapers, declared a loss of $1.3 billion. This loss is as a result of two items that had to be provided for in accordance with international accounting standards. The two items are firstly, an investment that was made by the NGC Group in 2013. An investment made by the NGC Group under a government in 2013. And that investment was an investment into PPGPL, Phoenix Park Gas Processors Limited, where the NGC Group acquired Conoco's 39% in PPGPL. So in 2013, the then government took a decision through NGC to acquire 39% of PPGPL that was currently owned at that time by Conoco. No problem. Unfortunately, though, the investment that was made, the acquisition that was made for $600 million, 3.8 billion TT dollars in 2013, was an overvalued investment. So every year, in accordance with accounting standards, the auditors have to look at investments and they have to say, well, what are the investments valued on the books? And at the time, they purchased $2.3 billion out of that $3.8 billion, so was actually recorded as goodwill, an accounting concept where it is a value that is put, which is not a tangible value. It is a value, something called goodwill. And the goodwill was valued at the time in 2013 at $2.3 billion. Fast forward now to 2023, and every year it's being looked at. Every year it is being challenged. In 2023, the auditors of NGC came and said, hey, it is no longer, that was overvalued, and you now have to write off $1.5 billion of that goodwill. And what that means, ladies and gentlemen, is on NGC's books, they have to take a loss, they have to take a hit of $1.5 billion in their 2023 accounts for an investment made, an overvalued investment made in 2013. So the loss that you, me, and all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago suffered of $1.5 billion was as a result of that decision and those decisions taken in 2013 to acquire Conoco's shares of 39% in PPGPL at a certain value that now the accountants have said, hey, you have to write off $1.5 billion out of that value. The second reason for this NGC loss in 2023 is the CGCL investment. And I want to spend a little bit of time here this afternoon, population, explaining to you about the CGCL investment. Cast your minds back to the period where it was being announced. There was a mad scurry and rush in 2015 when we, the population, were being told that the government of the time, this is in early 2015, were investing along with the Japanese in a new methanol plant, and it was Caribbean Gas CGCL, with, as I said, chemicals, thank you, limited, which was being invested in. We came in as a government in September 2015. One of the first things that happened is we came under tremendous pressure from the other two shareholders because all of the legal documentation had already been executed. Every single piece of paper. There was only one outstanding item to consummate, to complete the CGCL deal. And that was a standard opinion given by the Attorney General to the financiers, which was the JBIC Bank from Japan, the Japanese government-owned bank in Japan, who was financing this project. All they required was that, and it was a done deal. But every other legal document had been signed. The Prime Minister tasked myself and the then Attorney General with locating the file because people were reaching out to the Prime Minister's office, the Minister of Energy, to complete this transaction. When we located the file, I will never forget, and here I am 9.5 years after, serving in government, the public servants on Monday, the 7th of September 2015, which was election day, at the Attorney General's office, wrote in red ink. You never see public servants write in red ink. I have the two permanent secretaries here at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. And if they were ever to write on a file in red ink, it means run for the hills. The public servants in the Office of the Attorney General on an election day, the 7th of September 2015, wrote to the Attorney General, the then Attorney General, who as we now know was on his way out of office that night, saying that they are not approving his signing of that Attorney General's opinion because it is not a good deal for Trinidad and Tobago. I have subsequently found the correspondence from the NGC president at the time to the Minister of Finance, Senator Larry Hawaii, as well as to the then Minister of Energy, Kevin Ramnarine. In February of that year, unfortunately I don't have a copy here, but I will provide the media with a copy, indicating, this is NGC writing, saying this is not a good deal for us, NGC, and for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and listing why it wasn't a good deal. Coming under tremendous pressure, including on the day of elections, putting pressure on the public servants at the AG's office to consummate, to complete this deal. Thankfully, the public servant stood up on that day, and it was not finalized. One of the first tasks that I had, and it was the Prime Minister who had the foresight. He's always told you all that he brought me in as a minister in the office of the Prime Minister. And it was with a great emphasis to focus on the energy sector and to help the various ministers of energy and the Ministry of Energy out of the office of the Prime Minister in the relationships over the coming years. Tasked me with the responsibility of seeing what we could do. Now, I've told you all the contracts were already signed. I went on a plane for less than 72 hours to Japan to meet with the government of Japan to see what we could reverse, if we could move some of the terms. You've heard this story before, but it's important that the population hear it today, and hopefully my friends in the media will also report it. One of the things that the government had done is they changed the gas allocation policy, making it a greenfield policy, which means whatever limited gas we have, ignore all of the contracts, all of the plants that have been there for decades, and give the gas to the new plant. That would have led to billions of dollars in lawsuits because it would have meant breach of contract. We had to reverse that. We then did the best that we could and removed, fortunately, I was able to persuade the government of Japan and the Mitsubishi Group to remove some of the more onerous terms, but it was not able to be a full reversal. The first thing they told me is they said, Minister Young, we have signed the contracts. What about sanctity of contract? And ask any lawyer in your life what that means. It means I have a signed contract. If you change it, you're going to breach the contract. And we had to persuade the government of Japan and the Mitsubishi Group to change some of the terms. One of the terms was that the NGC group had to fully secure the CGCL plant. Just like when you take out a mortgage on a house and it is fully secured by you, the guarantor. But what it said is if there was a breach and NGC had to move in as a guarantor and pay for the whole plant, over $200 million US, they will not get the plant. Who would guarantee to make any payment and not have the security of what you're paying? So you've made whole the person who has loaned the money, the bank and the other shareholders get to keep the asset after you've paid in full for it and you get nothing. So we removed that, we renegotiated that and a few other terms. But unfortunately, we were not able to renegotiate the price of gas and the low price of gas that was locked in for decades. That has changed and was going to change. It was always going to change. And that has led to billions of dollars of continued losses by the NGC group, including this year, a write-off of just under $400 million, meaning for 2023. So you add that to the loss that I've described from the 2013 investment into PPGPL of $1.5 billion, you add this $389 million loss from CGCL in 2023, and that means that NGC's books had to take a hit of just under $2 billion, which is what led to this loss of 2023. So I hope you, the population, I know the members of the media, particularly the ones who are here this afternoon with their business reporting expertise and experience, understand what I'm talking about. But I hope you, the population, now understand the sole reason for the loss by NGC in 2013, a loss that affects us, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, of $1.3 billion, is because of two decisions. The first in 2013, with the acquisition of Conoco's shares in PPGPL at an overvalue that has now had to be written down by $1.5 billion. And then this CGCL deal that was entered into that has to go down in history. The history of the energy sector of Trinidad and Tobago was one of the worst negotiated contracts and deals for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And that leads me to what I've seen. At no point in time in describing anything to you, whether it be as the Minister of National Security, the Minister of Energy, or any other portfolio, including the Minister of Communications, and any other member of this PNM government over the last 10 years, have you seen any personalization of attacks by a PNM government? You've never seen us personalize on individuals in a most undeserving manner any attacks, in particular on citizens who have given service. And there have been many, many manners of things where individuals have done wrong to Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. David Lee, who, as I'm sure you all know, his situation with the law, saw it fit to personalize an attack on the chairman of the NGC group, Dr. Joseph Khan. And it's right here today in the Newsday, in big headlines, keep an eye on NGC chairman Joseph Khan for the losses I have just described to you. What I have told you, people of Trinidad and Tobago, members of the media, is irrefutable. Absolutely no part of the 2023 losses incurred by NGC Group have anything to do with the current board of directors, the current management of NGC, or the current government of Trinidad and Tobago. I want to make that point abundantly clear. So this personalized attack, which seems unfortunately to be the modus operandi of those on the other side, is completely rejected. And I've come here today to ask you, the citizens, to have a lot more sense than they attribute to you, which I know you have, and to reject outright these continued personalized attacks by the opposition. The losses by NGC in 2023 are solely attributable to a transaction in 2013 of the purchase of Conoco's shares in PPGPL at an overvalue, and secondly, one of the worst contracts a government could have entered into in the energy sector in 2014, 2015 in CGCL, which continues to cost us, the citizens, billions of dollars in losses and will continue, the accountants say. And that is the truth as to why NGC has suffered these losses. Immediately thereafter, you have the comparative accounts, the first 9 months of 2024 for NGC, where they have declared just under $1 billion again in profit after tax. The group has continued to pay all of its taxes. And what you've seen over the last 10 years is the securing of our future through NGC. This government's policy has been to make sure NGC is across the whole value chain. So for example, the Dragon gas deal, the license that we've secured, that 30-year license from Venezuela, 30-year license includes NGC. NGC is in that for you, the people of Trinidad and Tobago. The same thing with the second license, the 20-year license for Conoco. NGC is in there, so they need upstream. You know the Atlantic LNG renegotiating, restructuring conversation where we've secured now an increase in the shareholding. You saw NGC get the first 2 cargoes of LNG from trains 2 and 3 just a couple of weeks ago. That would have never happened but for this government's management and difficult negotiations over 5 years, putting NGC in a better place and position to secure the future of Trinidad and Tobago. And every single transaction we negotiate, we're always making sure NGC is part of it, including the conversation, for example, the Prime Minister and I had with EOG yesterday, the conversations that we have with the leadership at BP, leadership at Shell, the leadership of Perenco, leadership of all upstream companies. And that is how you secure a future for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to provide this information to you, the population, this afternoon, and to assure you that we will continue to do all that is necessary to secure the future of Trinidad and Tobago through our gas sector, as we have shown you we have been focused on over the last 10 years. And today is to also let you know that the loss that NGC suffered, this record loss, which is hurtful, this record loss that NGC has suffered for 2023 is solely attributable to the decision makers in the period of 2013, which led to a $1.5 billion write-off of goodwill in 2023, and those decision makers in 2014, 2015, who could not negotiate an ice lolly from an ice lolly salesman. I thank you all very much, and I'll take any questions that you may have this afternoon. And by the way, Joel, just before you start, I will be providing a handout at the end of the conference with the necessary information.
All right, afternoon, Minister. You would have referenced the 2 transactions, PPGPL and the CGCL. At this point, we would have seen a loss, a $2 billion loss in 2020, and again, a $1.3 billion loss in NGC 2023. What would be your advice now for NGC with respect to those 2? Should divestment take place? What is the next step?
Okay, so the PPGPL, this write-off of goodwill, has basically adjusted it now. So you're dealing with what is the current value, the real value now. So you've taken the hit, so to speak. PPGPL remains a very good company, a very good investment. And we have also worked hard. I remember one of the last things we had to negotiate in the restructuring of Atlantic LNG was linked to the future of PPGPL, which was the gas that would flow from the upstreamers from Atlantic to PPGPL for them to make the products, the natural gas liquids products that they take out of it. And that was done to secure their future. Some of their shareholding is tied up in what we, the population, can invest in, which is TTNGL. And that too is this, what I've described here, is what has led, unfortunately, to no dividends being paid in the last couple of years. So that is something that is being looked at. That is something that they're discussing with the accountants. They're discussing, and they've come up with a number of options which they will address over the next year to sort of bring that back. But we had to take this hit of 1.5 billion, which is unfortunate. I remember in 2013 when we were doing it, that there were certain cautions and warnings. So that's the first thing. There is no reason to panic. There's no reason this is not going to be continuing for NGC. And I think what we have done and what we've negotiated and secured for the future is auguring well for NGC. And that's why I use the perfect example of those 2 cargoes of LNG. Because if you know the value of an LNG cargo on the international market, in particular the prices we've managed to negotiate over the last few years, that basket indices, that is a tremendous success for Trinidad and Tobago, because we never got any cargoes from trains 2 and 3 before. And now we will get through NGC. The CGCL one is a more difficult one. Unfortunately, we did the best we could. We've renegotiated as much as we could have in light of what I've told you. All contracts, all agreements were executed, save for that Attorney General's standard opinion. So NGC will just have to continue to limp along with the other shareholders with this investment. But the population will understand that when persons were given the responsibility to look after the NGC, that is what they put us in. And you can compare that now with what you've seen over the last 10 years and the fights for the people of Trinidad and Tobago to manage the energy sector to secure our future. And you do the math.
One of the things that would have transpired in NGC for 2024, we would have seen the retirement of Mr. Mark Lokwan as the president after 8 years. In January 2024, NGC would have stated that they would have started the process. They were going to begin the process of finding a successor for Mr. Lokwan. In the conversation with Dr. Khan, he is saying that they're going to restart the search for a successor. And he's saying that the reason why he's doing that is because of the pending election, and he believes that...
I saw that, yes.
What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree with that level of
First
thinking?
of all, thanks for giving me the opportunity to thank Mr. Mark Lokwan, who is now ORTT. And I was very proud and emotional when I saw Mark get that award a few months ago. Mark did tremendous service for Trinidad and Tobago, coming back to the helm and to lead NGC along with a good group of people at NGC over the last 8 years. With every change at the top, there's always going to be succession, and that's what needs to take place now. The first round of attempts at recruiting people, a new president of NGC, did not throw up anyone who could have just jumped into the role, especially at a difficult time. So understand, yes, I saw that interview focused on politics and a pending election, which may be something that persons would want to consider, because remember, you're putting yourself forward into a company that is 100% state-owned. So you, as the individual, if you, Joel, Julian, want to apply for the job, you have to consider a number of factors, I'm sure. So I can't say what people will consider when applying, but what I could say is, in the first attempt at recruitment, and understand that it was a time when there was still, Mr. Lokwan was still there. We were still trying to achieve a number of things. You would remember it's only in July of this year we got the mannequin coquina license from Venezuela. It's only in May of this year we got the OFAC approval to go ahead with coquina. So you had all of those moving parts that I would say the right person didn't seem to come up. There were some good prospects, and I'm hoping that when they reopen this process now, that some of those prospects would come forward. Maybe they've gained more experience over the period of time. But that is what it is. There's nothing more to it than that the obvious successor, the obvious person to take over did not come in that first go-around, which is not an unusual thing, especially when you're trying to recruit in the state sector. You would remember, even you look at Heritage, we had to go through a number of iterations with Heritage to now end up with Mr. Eric Keskula.
Minister Ryan Hamilton Davis from the Trinidad Newsday. I want to go back to Caribbean Gas Chemicals Limited. Now, at the beginning, you did mention something that is quite reasonable. At the end of the day, eventually all contracts come to an end. All right, that would include the CGCL. It would stand to reason. Yes. All right. Could you give me a timeline for the ending of that? And as you're speaking about that, is there any kind of intention to go back to the negotiation table and do something similar to what ALNG had? Yeah?
Excellent questions, Ryan. The first is I can't stand here right now and tell you with any certainty. I can't recall if it was a 20-year contract, a 15-year contract, a 30-year contract. So that will have to be provided, meaning the CGCL. But it's a new contract. So the term, if I remember correctly, would be around 30 years or more. This government has shown that it's prepared to enter into respectful conversations with the most sophisticated of people across the table. And that's literally what I've done for the last 9 years. And there may be possibilities here for us to enter into conversations with the other shareholders, Massey and Mitsubishi, because it's now been almost 4 years, if not 5 years, of it being operational. They're taking losses as well. So is there room for a renegotiation? Is there room for a restructuring of the arrangements? That hasn't happened as yet. I've not pursued that as yet. And I don't think it can be ruled out, quite frankly.
As far as PPGPL, as well as CGCL is concerned, a lot of the valuation behind it, especially where the goodwill is concerned, is based a lot on estimations on gas futures, performance of the company, that sort of thing. All right. Looking back at the 2022 NGC report, I saw that there were a few times where PPGPL in particular, they had a impairment cost, but for the most part, they were goodwill positive. It was valued a little bit higher. Tell me a little bit more about how the plans for 2027 with new gas coming in, how plans like that, and how the change in the whole field gas supply would change the value.
You're absolutely right. In the valuation of these things, one of the things you look at are future projections, which will be based on one of the elements, future gas, etc. I think there was some debate here as with the auditors, who, quite frankly, and I'll say it, I'm not sure they completely understand the energy sector. I mean, just in this room, we sat last week meeting with a rating agency and explaining to them how we see the future, etc. And you've seen how the rating agencies have listened to what we said as we've been delivering and given us good and stable ratings in the energy part for the past few years. That factors in, and I think as we move forward and as they see more things coming to be, I mean, just in the conversations you would have seen in today's papers, for example, BP and Perenco have signed off on a deal. That is a good thing for Trinidad and Tobago. Perenco have shown that they're able to go into mature fields and they're able to go after stranded reserves and to bring them to market. Perenco has gone from really being a minimal gas producer to now producing 40 to 45 million scuffs a day off of a well that 3 people tried prior to them and didn't succeed, and they were able to. So I think these things are going to factor in. I think we're going to see definitely over the next 2 years gas production that keeps us stable, and then is going to rise in 2027. And I think some of the things we're working on, and you would have seen Touchstone make an announcement, Touchstone and Shell as well, that Touchstone have purchased Central Block from Shell. That augurs very, very well for onshore production, because it shows Touchstone, who have been able to bring onshore gas to market, are now acquiring the asset, which would reduce their cost. So there are a lot of positive things going on. And you are the reporters, you speak to the people in the industry, and they will tell you that they're seeing a hive of activity. You go down to Tufco's plant. And I'd like to invite you all. There is a very telling chart in Tufco. And I think what I'll do is I'll find the photo and I'll put it up on social media later, that shows you all the platforms that they've built over the period of time. And it struck me when I went down there in the past couple of months, the period 2009 to 2016, nothing done. And then from 2016, you just see them. So you saw Mento go out last week. Manatee has started, which is going to be the largest production, and is a fact. So I will put up, they say a picture tells 1,000 words. I'll put that up for you all later, and you will see and let the population understand. That is why you have to go. That is why you have to have the conversations with the head of BP and say, hey, build your platform in Trinidad. That is why when people have an irresponsible conversation and say, take your rig and go, those are the types of stupid comments that lead to no work and nothing happening. You speak to the people in the industry now, they will tell you the survey ships are in, they will tell you the platforms are being built, they will tell you that there are pipelines being laid and all of these things. And all of that means is a beehive of activity that secures our future. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Peter Christopher from Guardian Media, CNC3. Of course, you preempted my question with regard to Manatee by bringing it up, but of course it's about a year since you came here and announced that the positive update with regard to the Dragon field. Are there any other updates that you could provide with regard to the progress with regard to that?
To which one? Well, Manatee is full speed ahead. You're seeing the work has begun at Tufco. All of the piles and the equipment is being brought in, the steel, etc. In fact, there was a running joke between Shell and EOG, who the ones managing the JV with Mento, and Shell were telling them, hey, hurry up and get your Mento platform out of the yard because we're ready to get on with Manatee. Manatee is progressing extremely well. They're aggressive with their timelines. I'm hoping it comes in before when they forecast it for. That could only be better for Trinidad and Tobago. That investment is billions of US dollars and is the single largest upstream project for decades in Trinidad, and we secured it. And remember the difficulties in securing that. We had to persuade the government of Venezuela to allow us to do the Manatee side without the Loran side. That in itself is unprecedented. Dragon, I mean, you all will continue to ask about Dragon. Dragon is not everything, but we continue to wait like the rest of everybody. But in the meantime, the work is progressing with Dragon. The survey ships are out there. They're planning how the pipeline will be built to the Hibiscus platform. They're planning where the wells will go. They were across in Venezuela recently retaining the service companies, both American as well as Venezuelan service companies, to carry out this project. And up to now, there's absolutely no hesitation or any reason on our part to think that there's a delay in it whatsoever. Shell are pressing full speed ahead with it as well.
All right, and if you could permit me to just step a little bit away from NGC-related activities, could you clarify whether the Tobago quarry operation has the necessary approvals and licenses from your ministry for the Tobago, to extract materials for the Tobago Airport project?
This is the Studley Park facility in Tobago. Yeah, I saw that report being highlighted by the media recently, and I know in the past there were some difficulties, there were some requirements that had to be fulfilled by the THA controlled Studley Park. Initially there may have been some reluctance on their part. It may be, but I don't want to say because I don't have a report in front of me, that they were provided some grace period and some sort of authorization to proceed. They were. Okay, I'm being told by the permanent secretary at the Ministry of Energy that did happen, that they were provided with I don't want to call it a letter of comfort, but maybe a sort of letter of authorization that they could proceed with their quarry activities for a period of time whilst they get their house in order and do what was being asked of them.
Minister, last week, the Prime Minister would have held a press conference where he raised some concerns about a newspaper headline. And you have been relating directly.
I've come here, yeah, go on.
You have been relating directly with Venezuela and your counterparts in Venezuela with respect to some of the transactions that are taking place. Have they raised any concerns? Have they raised any concerns about the headline? Because the Prime Minister would have mentioned that, concerns. What is the conversation like?
I think the Prime Minister closed off that conversation, so it's not for me to add anything. In the course of his conversation on that particular topic, he did mention that I was literally in Venezuela a few days before. As is usual, that conversation I had with the highest levels in Venezuela went well because of the relationship and the relationship of trust and respect that we've built up over the years as individuals representing our countries went well as I expected it, and there's alleviation. I can say that with that headline that we were in contact as well with both the United States government as well as the government of Venezuela and maintaining the relationships. That is what a responsible government does. We continue to maintain relationships. There are going to be curveballs that come at you from directions you may not have predicted, and it is how you manage it and how you keep the ship stable. And I think we've shown we've been able to do that. So I continue to maintain very close contact with the highest level of leadership in Venezuela, as we do in other countries that are important to Trinidad and Tobago. All right, Ryan?
Minister, we're seeing a lot of projects coming in, particularly by 2027. We're going to see a lot of returns on these projects, and things will be kicking off a lot. But I mean, I know these things take a lot of time to actually redound to actual benefit for people. Could you give me an idea of, would it be after 2027, after 2028, when people will actually get to see, what comes out of these projects?
Brian, some of the projects that you're seeing coming in now, so for example, you may have seen me with the BP leadership looking at the uncoiling and recoiling of pipeline, about 30 kilometers of pipeline that are going out for the SIP project. We just mentioned the Mento project. These are some of the projects that are coming in before 2027. So you have a number of projects that are going to keep the gas production going between now and 2027. What you see in 2027 is a huge uptick. But we have secured, fortunately, some of the smaller ones I've mentioned, the Perenco, that Mento, the SIP project with BP. Those are the types of projects, more infill drilling by BP. Shell is doing some work as well. Those are the projects that will keep us going until this, hopefully, rise with the Manatee and others in 2027.
Could you give me an example of, like, a revenue benefit, if possible, probably from the two cargoes that just went out? What can the country see from that?
What the country is receiving from that is the benefit of the sale of two cargoes for NGC. So NGC are the owner of those two cargoes, whereas before they would have never had that. So the same way BP and the same way Shell make money off of the sale of LNG cargoes, that's where we benefited there. So that would have been hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. Right? I don't want to misquote what is the cost of a cargo. What you're also seeing and what we're seeing is the benefit of the better prices that we've managed to negotiate over time. So if you follow the market indices, and it's interesting, in a conversation we were having just yesterday, the Prime Minister and I were having with some industry experts, their projection of LNG for the next few years is a very positive one. On the pricing side, you don't know with these things. You don't know. It is so volatile in a geopolitical world. But they were predicting higher prices on not only Henry Hub, but they said the markers of the Far East that we've used, that JKM marker, a lot of gas would be sold in the Far East. So what you are seeing, Trinidad and Tobago, is the benefit of these prices we've negotiated. All right.
Minister,
Peter.
Of course, there's been the focus here is on NGC, but are there any other state entities under your purview, let's say Heritage per se, what is the assessment of their performance given some of the challenges that we've seen in the energy sector over the year?
Heritage has done well in terms of stabilizing itself. Fortunately, we've seen oil production increase a few thousand barrels of oil a day over the last couple of months. I have been speaking, in fact, just this morning, I met with the chairman of Heritage and speaking to them about ways they can be more aggressive to be able to bring in more oil for us, the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I'm trying to push them a little harder for them to do a bit more. They've done well, but you could always keep pushing and doing better. So I am satisfied. If I had to grade the energy sector at the end of the year, I'm very satisfied by what has been achieved in terms of lining up and securing our future while stabilizing things. Okay? Yeah.
We always have to touch on the refinery. Any updates with respect to, I think the last information here is like 3 bidders.
Yeah? Okay, well, thanks for that. Fortunately, I keep in touch with the moving parts. As you all are aware, the evaluation committee had recommended to Cabinet that they had narrowed it down to 3 entities that had proposals in that were worthwhile continuing the conversations and discussions. The evaluation committee under High Commissioner Dan Paul actually met in the last 10 days or so. Within that period, he returned to Trinidad to lead the team. Coming out of that, only within the last 48 hours, letters have gone out to the three prospective persons who have the three prospective companies that have put in proposals that have made it this far, taking it to the next stage, and with quite an aggressive timeline for the first quarter of next year of things that need to be done, etc. So let's keep our fingers crossed. I am not going to predict that. What I can say is they have proceeded with their work, and now the next stage is taking place where these three companies are being asked, okay, well, this is what needs to be done. And if they manage to fulfill those things and tick the boxes, you never know. Hopefully we may have some good news. All right? Thank you all very much for your time this afternoon. I wish all of you a safe season. Thank you.
So today, I'm kind of happy that we're doing the Christmas show at a Haagen-Dazs store because I feel as if I'm in a little wonderland. These involved ancestors of this thing. We call it, we don't know what that is cookie. Keisha, I don't know what to do with this. I feel arts and craft. What? Oh, it's all of that. It's formal.
My producer sent us a Christmas rhythm.
Oh, your producer sent you a Christmas rhythm. Well, you're here to give back because we're not paying them. All right, guys, the things I do for pop. And in full costume.
Tricks of the trade.
They are so well spoken. Fancy.
Have a Merry Christmas.
Mucho panandero. Guillo. Ay. Guillo. Ay.
I know it sounds romantic to leave everything behind to bake bread and muffins, but this isn't us. We haven't worked here in 20 years.
I'm from the Great National Trust Bank. Is there somewhere we could talk?
2 weeks.
That gives you until the 24th.
But I mean, that's Christmas Eve.